Welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Erin James. And the chairman has finally spoken to the fans in a pre-recorded interview with Rangers TV. Obviously with preset questions, obviously questions that he would have been able to see pre-interview and obviously prepare for. I would be very interested personally to see how he would perform at, for example, a fan forum, or how he'd perform if he came on a podcast, for example, and actually answered fan media questions and actually talked properly to the fans and openly and was not prepared. I think, one thing that really did come out of that interview today is how badly we actually need a CEO to run the club. Bennett doesn't look comfortable at all in front of the camera. Bennett doesn't really look comfortable at all running the club. I think, the club needs to be run by the CEO. It needs to be run by someone who actually knows how to run a football club. Bennett did say in his interview that we are close to getting a new CEO, which was interesting, obviously, since the resignation of James Bisgrove as he headed off to Saudi for the Saudi millions. He obviously has gone now, and we are now looking for a new CEO. So it'll be interesting to see who this candidate is that the board have allegedly got close to appointing. There's a number of topics that John Bennett covered in his interview. And it was kind of, for me, the bit on the stadium was kind of just airy-fairy, and it was very much leaving the fans and leaving the club in the vacuum, as John Bennett put it. Now, I know some of that is not his fault, and I understand that, he cannot control shipping lanes, he cannot control delivery dates and times. They are very much down to shipment companies, to logistics companies, to the ports, and to how quick ships can get here. I understand that, and I fully obviously sympathise with him and the board from that aspect. However, you've got to kind of say there was pre-planning needed to be done around this, and in terms of getting these deliveries in on time, they could have really done with being a bit more joined up thinking from the board, from the CEO, the then CEO James Bisgrove, for example. So, what did he have to say? Well, he said that his staff, his team at Rangers, obviously the guys behind in the front offices and in the offices, were working tirelessly, and that we needed to not lose sight of who this redevelopment of the Copeland was for. It was for the fans and for disabled fans, and was long overdue. And I understand that. I get that. That was the reason for doing this. That was why we were doing this, and I understand all that. I get that. But when you start a building project, and a major capital building project like Rangers have done, you give yourselves enough time to complete said building project. You do not, leave yourself in a position where, realistically, you are going to be looking at the start of October before Rangers can return to play at Ibrox, which could well have an impact on Europe. We could actually find ourselves, if we were to qualify for one of the group stages of the UEFA Champions League, possibly playing at Hampden whilst playing our league games at Ibrox, due to the been down very much to the willingness of UEFA to allow us to move grounds during that process. Look, he said that he apologised again to the fans for what had happened as regards the stadium, and look, I appreciate the apology, of course we do, but he then tried to put context on it. He said there was 3 consignment deliveries on 3 vessels, and the pinch points were the ports, in particular Singapore, although he didn't really explain why Singapore was a pinch point. He said that vessel 1 was in Glasgow, and that delivery was already here. However, the more crucial deliveries of vessel 2 and vessel 3 were still on their way. He said once the second delivery arrived, then that would see us moving towards the final stage before vessel 3 arrives. Apparently, as it stands, the delivery is due in the second week of August. Apparently, vessel 2 will arrive in Glasgow in the second week of August, and vessel 3 arrives the third week of August, which definitely takes us into September. And, he talked about the fact that Rangers should be back at Ibrox by the end of September. But he said that could well slip, which to me sounds like it will slip, and it will be October, November time before Rangers are able to play at home again, which, is an absolute shambles. It genuinely is a shambles. And I understand that, he can't control delivery times, but like I said, more planning should have gone into this, more preparation should have gone into this in terms of delivery dates, in terms of looking at when things come into the UK. I mean, if we're looking at the 28th of September as a possible date, that would be the Rangers Hibs game. I think more likely you're looking at the 5th of October, the Rangers St Johnstone game, or possibly the 26th of October, the Rangers St Mirren game, before we are definitely back in Ibrox. He said that as well, he was questioned as regards the seating arrangements. Obviously the first game is the 10th of August at home, which obviously will be at Hampden Park now. And John Bennett explained why it would be Hampden, we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, but he said that by the end of this week, fans should find out where they're sitting, because it has taken this amount of time for seat mapping and looking at where people are going to sit, apparently. Although listening to what fans have said, they don't appear to have had any communication on what has actually happened as regards seating. It doesn't appear like they've been given any choice as to where they've been sitting. It's all been done apparently via mapping, which I know is difficult in terms of actually getting fans to choose seating, but it to me seems that there's a bit of a I don't know, it just seems a bit of a farce, a bit of a badly organized situation again. He talked about Hampden Park. He talked about the fact that it had to be Hampden because of the fact that it was somewhere where we needed somewhere close to where our fans could go. It's within the same city, obviously, a stadium that was big enough to house all our fans. Obviously, Hampden is slightly bigger than Ibrox. He thanked the SFA and the people at the club for the work they'd done, and said the SFA had been very good and worked in partnership, which does surprise me slightly given the SFA's hatred for Rangers. But he said that obviously it had to be Hampden, which it is fair enough. I think he did have to be Hampden, really. The next topic of conversation was all around money, around the situation with the signings and so on. He talked about the fact that the pre-player trading model losses were 10.5 million, which as a club and in line with FFP is absolutely unsustainable for any football club. He said that the good news was that Rangers were well on their way to wiping out that debt, and that the debt was not there, which obviously will disappoint those across the city who call us, obviously say that we're going bust and we're going to administration again, which obviously, is 100% not true. It's just the stuff of their dreams. He talked about the fact that, it had been hard and it had been tricky to get this under control. He said that a club shouldn't be losing 10.5 million, and long term this was not sustainable. And he said there was a critical change needed at the football club. He said the board have done what he called financial backstopping for a long time now, which I think is very much, propping up and stopping any debts affecting the club. He says in the real world, you need a situation where incomings match outgoings, which is very much this, as a business model, a business cannot operate beyond its means. And I understand that. I very much understand that situation. The issue we've got, I think, with this is the fact that why have we run up those debts? Why have we got ourselves into this position? And that's not just because of the managers. That's not just because of Michael Beale or Gio Van Bronckhorst or Ross Wilson. That's because of the mismanagement by the board as well. So they're kind of partly responsible. And John Bennett, might not talk about that or address that, but he was vice chairman to Douglas Park. He was involved in a lot of decisions, in terms of hiring Michael Beale, signing off on signings last summer. So he has a portion of blame to carry with those bad decisions that were made, along with obviously James Bisgrove, who is no longer with the club. He talked about the fact that in this transfer window, we have spent allegedly £11.5 million, and that doesn't include loan fees, which he said are expensive because you've got a loan fee and a signing on fee and an agent fee, which we know is there. It was interesting that he talked about the fact that Philippe Clement is all in on this, as are I think, was it virtually everyone or most people are, which insinuates that certain people on the board are not all in on this philosophy. Bennett talked about the fact that that this was a recruitment strategy that was around signing players for the future, but also signing players for the now. The fact that we need to obviously develop this trading model to make our business financially sustainable and actually work in the long term. And if you look across the city, they are run properly. They are run to the right degree. In terms of the fact they do operate at a profit, they can spend money, and they are run better than we are. And I hate to say that, but they are. He talked about the fact that this short-term recruitment strategy that had worked in the past hadn't worked. and then we'd obviously had a rinse and repeat strategy where we'd obviously brought in managers, sack managers, brought in managers, sack managers. And yeah, he's right, that didn't work. But has he finally learnt? That's the question. Has he finally actually learnt from that? And Bennett is part of that issue. He was part of the board. He was Douglas Park's vice chair, etc., etc. He talked about Rangers' imperative one is always to win. And he's right. Rangers' imperative one is always to win. We have to. We don't perhaps get the time that other clubs around Europe get to rebuild. Other clubs in the European leagues can rebuild, and there's not a kind of a shove on them winning the league every season. There is in Scotland, and beating Celtic. In other leagues, there's perhaps not that rivalry. There's perhaps not that intenseness to the competition. So they get more time. We certainly don't get that. But, he talked about the second imperative for Rangers being putting in place this player trading model, and it needed implementing. We needed to invest in recruitment for the long and the short term, and it wasn't going to be done in just one window, which, is right. I think that's right. Realistically, you can't solve all the problems of Rangers in one window. Philippe Clement told the board in May, apparently, that this was not a short-term gig. It was a long-term rebuild. It was a bigger rebuild than he first thought. Bennett tried to kind of clear up the remarks that Clement made when Clement said this was not what he was expecting in October. A lot has been read into those remarks that Clement made. A lot of remarks saying that, Clement was told he had money, hasn't got money. That was what was kind of insinuated from that. It appears now that Bennett is trying to row back on that and saying that Clement didn't understand at that point how big a rebuild was needed at Rangers, how much was needed to change at this club going forward, which, I think we all realize that there is a big change needed at this club in terms of, not just the playing squad, but in terms of the recruitment strategy, in terms of the player trading model, in terms of setting up a financial sustainability to the transfers in this club. There is a real need to move this club onto a par and a parallel with the likes of Ajax, PSV Eindhoven, Benfica, Sporting Lisbon, FC Porto, who can compete because of the fact that they have these player trading models that raise vast sums of money for them to go out and recruit players. So, he's right from that aspect. But, I think, again, the underlying situation is we wouldn't be in the mess we're in if the board previously and he had not made this huge error in managerial appointments and in signing off on certain contracts that were utterly ludicrous. I think he was right as well. I can't believe I'm saying. I think some of you are going to think, well, Owen's gone mad agreeing with John Bennett, but he was right in saying we can't keep changing managers. This is something I've been saying now for the last month or so. For longer than that, really. We can't just keep having this rinse repeat strategy where we get to October, we sack our manager, and then we talk again about rebuilding, changing, regenerating the team in line with the new manager's philosophy. That can't continue. That just cannot. We're in danger of becoming Watford. We're in danger of becoming Chelsea. We're in danger of becoming a laughingstock for changing managers. It's just, ludicrous. And if you look at clubs that do change managers on a regular basis, like the Watfords of this world, Sunderlands of this world, they don't have success. They don't have success on the football field because there is no consistency of approach. You get a manager in, suddenly Manchester United, another example, a team that had one manager for a massive period of time and were unendingly successful. I know a lot of that was down to the fact that Sir Alex was an amazing manager and had some fantastic footballers. But you look post Sir Alex and you've got a situation where they have gone through managers like some people go through underwear. Van Gaal, Mourinho, Moyes, Ollie, now Ten Hag, Ryan Giggs for a short period. They've changed managers and they've had very little success in proportion to what they've done previously. And I know the game goes in cycles, but by that token, you've got to kind of pick a manager and stick with him and back him and give him the chance to prove that he is the man for the job. And I think that's what we need to do with Philippe Clement. So I do support what John Bennett says there. There is, I think, a whole lot of issues to come out of this interview, and I'm sure over the next few days that podcasts and fans will continue to mull over what John Bennett said, mull over how this is going to affect the club going forward. I think we're in a position where whatever needs to be done, this is not a quick fix, in terms of not only the stadium, but in terms of the playing squad. It is not a quick fix. It is going to take time. This club is in a mess. It's been in a mess for a while now. And, maybe it's taken Philippe Clement and Niels Koppen to come in and actually sit down with the chairman and the then CEO, James Bisgrove, and say, this is the situation. This club is a mess. It is not heading in the right direction. It is not going to succeed. You're not going to be able to buy the players you want. You're not going to succeed financially if we don't put into place this model and we get this model up and running. I don't know. I wasn't obviously in that meeting, but it seems that very much is the message and the vision that is being put out. I think that the appointment of a new CEO is vital. I think what we need to do is the board, and I think the Rangers board have been very guilty in the past of interfering far too much in the running of this club, often to the detriment of how the club is run and to the success not only off the field but on the field. So for me, what needs to happen is whoever comes in as CEO in the next week, 10 days, however long it takes to appoint them, they need to be left to get on with the job, left to run the club, and the board just need to be there to report to, not actually try and run the club. That needs to be done by the chief executive officer, the person who actually knows how to run a business, how to run a football club. And I know that a lot of these board members like Bennett, like Park Jr., etc., like Holstead are successful businessmen, but the situation you've got to kind of face is that football as a business is not the same as venture capital. It's not the same as running a used car dealership. It's not any of those things. It is very different. It is a very different industry with very different factors, with very different outside influences on what you can and can't do. When you're a venture capitalist, when you're a retail business, when you're any sort of business other than football, you get a little bit more freedom to operate as you want. And your external factors, yes, you have customers in some examples, if you're in the retail business, but other than that, you are very much dependent on what you do and how you run your business to how successful you are. Whereas when you're running a football club, you are not only determined by your fans who bring money into the club, but also by the opposition you face on the field, by the financial deals that are done outside your power, like TV deals, like sponsorship deals with the leagues. So, it is a very different business, and that's why we need a CEO who understands the football business. Well, guys, let me know what you think of the John Bennett interview. Guys, as always, pleasure talking to you. Absolutely love doing this job. Love talking about this. It's not really a job for me. It's a love. It's a passion. I love this club. I love talking to you guys out there. Please smash that sub. Help us to keep on growing. And as always, on the way out, please smash the like. And remember always, we are the people.